Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session this afternoon, Persuasion by Design. My name is Sally Reynolds, although on the screen at the moment, you'll see me described as Monica Theron, but in fact, we're having a little bit of a technical problem here. This is what happens, unfortunately, when you go on holidays and you don't run webinars for a couple of months. So forgive us if it's taking us a few minutes just to get ourselves started. But I'm delighted to welcome you. It's lovely to see so many people joining us this afternoon for this session. And we have a great lineup of speakers ready to go. So while we're meanwhile sorting ourselves out on this end, I'd also like just a couple of house rules, a couple of things that we always suggest at the beginning of these webinar sessions is that, first of all, if you would like to, we will be recording this session, so we will make the recording available afterwards. Our presenters are all very kindly also giving us access to their presentations, so we'll make them available to you afterwards as well. So you don't need to keep notes during the presentations this afternoon. We will try and make the links available in the chat for you so that you can see what's actually, and you can check yourselves, the various links that are being shared. We also ask if you wouldn't mind to keep your microphones off during the session, switched off, but do keep your cameras on because it's always nice for our speakers and for us to see who's joining us today. We'd also like, if you wouldn't mind, to adjust your name. So if your name is listed under participants list, and if you haven't joined us before, you know that you can also adjust your name there to indicate the name of the organization that you're working with. This is also very helpful for networking and to allow people to know who's joining us for the session this afternoon. And to do that, you just click on the three little dots to the right of your name on the participants list, and you can change and add the name of your organization. So without too much further ado, as I say, while we organize ourselves a little bit more at our end, I'd like to, first of all, introduce you to the speakers that we have this afternoon. As you know, this session this afternoon is all about influence and content, understanding how social media and the social media tools and channels and people on channels actually work in persuasion, how they help to influence the way that we think and the way that we do things. We think this is really a must for anyone teaching media decoding in today's world to understand some of these kinds of aspects. So we're delighted with our lineup this afternoon. We are going to start with Professor Dr. Laura Vandenbosch, as you can see, from the Director of the Media Psychology Lab, Communication Science, KU Leuven here in Belgium. She's going to present the MIMIC project. She'll be followed then by Dr. Catalina Goanta from Utrecht University, the Netherlands, who will present the Human Ads project. Sorry, Catalina. And our third speaker this afternoon is Alyssa McIntyre. She's program officer in the digital program, the Aspen Institute in Germany. And as you can see, she's going to be presenting influencers against disinformation. So three really interesting speakers with lots to share with you. Please feel free to add your questions and comments into the chat. We'll make sure that our speakers get a chance to answer you. And also, of course, we'd love to hear from you during the discussion and the question and answer session that we'll have later on. So we're going to start with Laura. Laura, you're all set to go, I hope. You have your slides ready to go.
Yes, thank you. I'll start sharing my presentation.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
All right, can you see the slides?
We see them in preview at the moment. If you can put them to full view, that'd be great.
Are you seeing it?
No, we still see in preview. So if you, that's it, that's perfect.
Okay, super, fantastic. It
There
took
you
some
go, Laura.
time.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy and honored that I can share here some of the findings of our European MIMIC project, in which we were examining to which extent youth of today are mimicking online models. I first would like to give some attention to the team we have here at Leuven, the Media Psychology Lab, because of course I don't do that research alone. There's always a whole team working with me. And so I'm presenting here today on behalf of all these wonderful colleagues at the University of Leuven. So To kick off, I'm sure you're aware of the public debate that is going on the fact that there is today claims that there is a great deal of evidence, for instance, that social media are a substantial cause of mental well-being problems in youth. And that exactly was the basic hypothesis of our MIMIC project, of the European project that we have run in Europe during the last 5 years, and that has come to an end in the next months. So what did we do? We wanted to document whether it is true that youth today encounter a lot of ideals in media, meaning people who embody perfect lives, perfect standards, who excel in a variety of areas. And one of these areas was, of course, social media and its influencers. Next, we did studies in 3 different countries on the short-term and long-term effects of these ideals. We worked with Belgium, Slovenia, and France because these countries have different cultural histories, but also different orientations towards ideals, as well as different rates of technology adoption. So that made a very interesting case study. Let me tell you something about the results. I will not focus too much on everything we found because that would take me a whole afternoon, but I'll try to shed some lights on, let's say, trends that emerge across all of these different studies. So let me first start with an illustration based on one of the content analyses we did to understand whether it is now really true that the social media that adolescents today get to see, whether they truly abound with ideals that might pressure them in real life. So we went to have a look at the most popular influencers, and for this study we took a random subsample of Instagram influencers that were highly popular, and we took a part of their posts. We focused especially on female influencers because they are still much more popular than male influencers, and we selected popular influencers who have origins from 3 different cultures here in Belgium, as well as in the US, as well as in the China. That said, the audiences of these influencers are highly global. And we wanted to know, like, what kind of messages do these influencers actually send? It was not that diverse, although they brand themselves as very diverse in terms of the inspiration that they intend to offer. They usually have quite similar messages, and the most frequently used one is just a message in which you can admire the beauty of the influencers, and we called it the "look at me" type of post, in which they simply show how beautiful they look that day and say something like "good morning," "ready for a good day." It's actually meaningful, and the visual is especially aligning with a very dominant appearance ideal. Other, let's say, ideals they embodied was the fact that they have friendships and really close connections with others, and so that they were very popular also in a way, but also in romance, that they had this in-depth relationship going on that showed them how happy they are in this life. The other thing is that they did activities, and those activities were not like a typical walk in the park. They were usually full of very, let's say, exciting activities in which they, for instance, visited friends or another exciting city. The other things was that they usually also had somewhere in the profile an exceptional performance to show off how they, let's say, they ran a marathon or they went diving at some exclusive location. It was very much achievement oriented, and so showing off at least once across all posts in how much they excel in this specific area and that they work hard for it. Of course, also they claim to be an expert in something, but interesting, although their profile is set to intend to inspire in this expert area, whether it is fitness, whether it is beauty or food, it's only 20% of the posts that they typically post. So they post much more on how they look than on their so-claimed expertise on which they are gaining their online fame on. So in conclusion, we decided that the ideals are definitely present in this influencer content, and that the most used ideal is the beauty ideal, in which they especially just show how beautiful they are and align with the typical, very stereotypical beauty standards in today's society. Such emphasis is not only present, let's say, in influencer content, so that is important to remark. You also get to see that when you look at the things that youth post themselves. So if we ask children themselves, what do you regularly post online? They say themselves that they often post pictures in which they look pretty, in which they align with dominant appearance ideals, in which they look happy. It's always happy pictures, it's always having fun, or when they feel they have done something adventurous, something noteworthy, that is the kind of thing they put on their social media, making the environment that you scroll through, that is composed out of influencers or their everyday peers, being highly composed out of ideal content, meaning people look great, they do fantastic things, and they all seem very happy. Something we coined in our research as the positivity bias, as the fact that everyone seemed to be doing very well when you look at it through a social media glass. We also had research done based on the posts they post themselves, because of course the prior study was just about what they think they post. So we also went looking at what is actually there on your profile when you look at it from Instagram, but we also asked them to donate posts from Snapchat or TikTok to see how much these ideals prevail. We did it on different ideals, so I can also talk to you about social ideals or the extent to which they showed themselves as very adventurous, but just for sake of time, I focus here on the appearance ideal and the extent to which they show themselves as pretty, as sexy. And we found that it was very widespread, and that at least 40% of adolescents had, in one of their latest two posts, posted a picture in which they looked really pretty. And they especially emphasized facial ideals. So that was really remarkable, and is something we've seen in the beauty let's say field in general, is that there used to be a much more emphasis on body ideals in terms of thin or muscularity, but with social media we've become much more focused on facial ideals. Think about Botox and lips, and that's because of selfies, of course, of the face, and they're highly popular. We saw some differences between the platforms, but interestingly, it's highly similar. So everyone seems to be doing this, seem to present themselves as very pretty of different platforms. And the only thing that is consistent here, but also in other research, is that girls do it much more often than boys. So in general, media indeed seems to abound, or social media, with ideals. And the most known ideal in this way is the beauty ideal, because that one seems to be most popular in both influencers, but also in the content that you themselves upload in the social media environment. That said, this is not unique to social media, because if we look at traditional media outlets like television, or here I gave an example of magazines that we followed over the course of 10 years, and the advertisements that occur in these magazines, in which we see that things such as body diversity are actually almost absent. If you take a subsample of more than 1,000 ads across a period of more than 10 years, you get 0.5% who were not thin. So I think that clearly emphasizes that society also in other media outlets still values ideals a lot. What are now the effects of being exposed to all of these ideal influencers who claim to inspire you on their lifestyle or other subjects, yet most of their content is composed on, let's say, pictures, videos on how pretty they look and what fantastic things they do. So what can we expect that occurs then? We have been talking with youth across years, and we have seen a lot of changes also in how they describe it. It started with them especially recognizing that everyone seems to be pretty, seems to be nice, seems to be doing perfectly on social media. But we've also seen across the years, and I'm here citing quotes from 2019, so almost 6 years ago, with quotes that were done, I think, last year, a study. In which we see that it changed in the sentence, that it became much more pervasive. And this is due to algorithms that are much more present on today's social media than before, and that easily capture that you are sensitive to appearance, for instance. And the fact that it all is so curated today that it sometimes even seems that these people do not apply filters, do not stage their, let's say, pictures or adventures. And this authenticity, this fake authenticity that influencers bring today, come with an additional threat that it has become even more unrealistic, the demanding standards that they uphold in their social media accounts. So youth themselves are very much aware of let's say, how important it is to be ideal in the online world. And they also care for it when they, for instance, are posting a picture about their own friends. But of course, this is about what they see is happening and what they think the effects are. But we know already a long time in media effects research that that is not necessarily also the effect that you have, because there are all kinds of biases at play. When you ask someone, how affected are you by social media? Is it damaging your well-being? We're never sure whether you're describing an actual effect or whether you're describing a cognitive bias that is at play and well documented when we talk about media effects and how damaging they are. So I cited here Candice Odgers, that also always makes the comparison with vaccines. If we want to know whether a vaccine works, we are also not just going to simply ask people, does it work? But we're also going to see whether real changes occur over time that are linked to a change in, let's say, having a dose of a vaccine, or in our case, a different dose of social media diets. So that's what we've been doing in the rest of the Mimic project, try to documenting how all of these social media diets can affect youth. And we've been doing this by performing all kinds of quantitative research, in which we especially wanted to document short and longer term effects. If you want to read more about it, we have many publications documenting all different types of factors, because if we would agree about one thing, it is you cannot talk about the effect of social media, because there is no such thing as the effect of social media. It all comes down to what are you doing on social media, who are you following, how does your social media environment looks like, and who are you? And then we can start talking about whether social media is good or is bad for you. It's the same thing. My colleague always makes the comparison with a playground. You cannot say whether a child's playground at school is bad or good for a child. It depends on who are they talking or playing, or what are they doing on the playground. And then we can start saying something about what's happening in the playground. So the same goes with social media. So I'm just going to say some of these observations that we have to take into account when we are talking about what's happening in social media effects, and the things we found across all of these studies in all of these different European countries. Insight one is, I think it's really important to know that short-term effects occur much more easily. So youth are much more easily affected in all kinds of outcomes on a short-term basis than on a long-term basis. And these effects differ mostly because people just do different things on social media. And I think a good example is boys and girls. And I here show graphs of a study we did on how they interact with appearance content that often comes from influencers, because they show very idealized appearances, in which we see that especially girls who see this kind of contents, that they are the ones who worry much more about their own body, have much more attention to how they look during the day as compared to boys. And that is especially the case because boys in generally, they do not see this content very often on their social media accounts, so they don't get to the threshold level, let's say, in which it can affect them. Of course, this is really important because that does not mean boys are not affected, but it's not typically in most boys' interest, and that's why they typically get less affected. Other conclusion that we had is, if we are really looking at how does it change adolescence over the course of a longer time, how can we see whether these, let's take again the appearance example, that it really leads to differences in who you are, in who you become. And there we see that it's really important that you cannot summarize it. You cannot talk about the average population, because for every outcome, every social media interaction we're talking about, we have to know who you are. And there are different groups emerging depending on different types of interactions we're talking about, or different types of outcome. And if we, for instance, take the example of those, we are seeing a lot of influencer content in which they present their idealized beauty. We see that with half of the youth, this will lead to long-term changes over time, in which they get into this loophole, in which they increasingly see over time these kinds of posts emerging on their feed, and increasingly over time start to worry about appearance. Such effects are not substantial in size yet. If you compare them, for instance, with other disciplines, they are equal to the effect of genes on certain diseases, or what I always like as an example in comparison of media effect sizes, they're the same as the effect of parenting style in terms of nutrition of the child. So I do think we agree in general that this is substantial. And if you look at let's say the challenges of today, and the number of eating disorders, I think it's important to know that this is a loop that at least in half of children seems to be evoking a spiral that is negative. Another conclusion is that it's not all negative. Of course not. You have both negative effects, like the ones I just described, that occur in half of the youth, but you also have positive effects. And this is equally important, because we also have children who seem to be interacting a lot with posts in which they show friendships, or are talking about a fun moment in which they can capitalize through those social media, the fun moments they have with friends, and that really helps them to build stronger social capital, to rely more on their friends, to have less insecurities about their friends. And these posts, they keep on nourishing this, so a very positive spiral occurs. So there are also those social media users who really grow into the benefits of social media use. Yet, just like the negative effects are not for everyone, it's the same with the positive effects. And in general, we label the positive effects of social media, digital media in general, as digital flourishing. And we've done also a series of long-term trajectories. And what you especially need to remember from these graphs is that not everyone seems to flourish. Even worse, the more time continues, the less this problematic group starts to continue to flourish, and the more they start to struggle. So it's sometimes said that it's especially a problem for early adolescents. Well, our research says that those who do not have the benefit of digital media use, they especially struggle even more at the end of adolescence, which is a point in time that collapses with the moment that parents let go of mediation. And so when there is much less parental control, this seems to be worsened. That was basically my presentation for today. I would like to end with, I think this is a situation in which there are opportunities, but there are also clear risks. It is not a black and white story. It's very nuanced. It's very complex. We have to make sure we don't harm more than that we let others benefit. Media literacy if you're interested in those studies, has also been shown in multiple of our studies to be a key role in ensuring people really flourish. Yet I also think we should agree that there has to be top-down measures and the environment has to be made safer, as these technologies have not been designed for children and we see too strong trajectories of negative spirals. Thank you for your attention and feel free to contact me if you have still any questions.
Thank you, Laura. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so we're back on, on stream. Thank you. That's really fascinating. We have a couple of questions here. I know you're a bit tight on time and unfortunately won't be with us till the end, but I just would like to put a couple of quick questions to you. Annie makes, in Armenia, she talks about most young people follow influencers and rely on them. The issue is not so much always about quality media content. They claim, and influencers claim, that quality media content doesn't get consumed. She wanted to know what are the current trends and how could this problem be approached? So having influencers consider that quality content is of value. Is that a bit outside your study, or would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, but it depends on what is quality content, in your view. So I think it's also a bit of a moral perspective here. What do we consider high quality content, let's say? I think we have different ways of approaching this in the field, and you could approach it like, is it age appropriate? That is one thing that we often focus on. The other thing is it, let's say, appropriate from a well-being perspective? For instance, what I often point at is the narrowly defined appearance ideals and like how they show off a very idealized appearance while maybe bringing a very nice message about caring for each other. It's still a bit a conflicting content because you're selling another ideal that we know is very harmful, but you're packaging it with some kind of positive moral message, and it's often not black and white. It's often very nuanced. They often do partially things that we consider, let's say, age appropriate or part of, let's say, high morality, but they're also very conflicting things. And then I think it gets to what is the thing that they will remember. Like, will they learn the moral message that is positive, or will they especially think, whoa, she looks great today, I want to look like that also? And that's the problem with visuals. Like the positive message, let's say, in terms of well-being, often comes in a caption or comes in text, but social media are highly visual and visually oriented, and typically, let's say, the antisocial part of their content comes in the visual, and we see that the visual is much more powerful than the other.
Indeed. Yeah, there's a couple of other points in there just about what makes people feel so insecure, which I think might be a little bit outside of of your study. But I like this last question from Irina, which I'm going to put you. Do you have any recommendations on what responsibilities parents should have to support a positive experience, I suppose, an experience of the social of following influencers online, particularly with teenagers or younger people? Any suggestions? Any recommendations?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's super important that we do not put all the responsibility with parents. So that is, I think, something we've been doing way too much, I think. Yet that said, I think parents definitely make a difference. I did not show this data today, but we followed, for instance, children of which parents are highly investing in what we call here the positivity bias and regularly talk with their children. It doesn't even matter whether the parent is on social media, understands everything that's going on, but shows an interest and regularly checks with how this works, like exchange thoughts about it. And we see that indeed, those children that have parents that regularly talk with them about social media and everything that's going on there, that they grow in self-esteem, but also they develop really valuable skills in terms of how to cope with this content, because children are highly literate in terms of critical knowledge, but they're very poor in activating this knowledge. And when they see all this influencer content, they just keep scrolling. They don't take action. While
Yeah.
it's actually this active skill set that really protects them in the long term and in the short term. So
Which brings us back to the importance of media literacy, which is what you mentioned earlier.
absolutely.
Yeah. Laura, look, thank you very much. I'm going to be murdered because we're a little bit behind time. So thank you so much. We know, thank you, Chloe, has put all the research being done by the Mimic Project team. You can find out more. And very welcome to contact Laura, she said as well, if you'd like to know more. So moving on, I'd like to now introduce you to our second speaker this afternoon, Dr. Catalina Goanta. As I mentioned, she's from the Utrecht University of the Netherlands, and she's going to present the Human Ads Project. Catalina, over to you.
Thank you so very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to talk to you about our research in the field of influencer marketing. And let me just share my screen and then we can get this started. Can you see my full screen just to double check? Great. So it is a pleasure also to follow what Laura was talking about. I'm a legal scholar. I've been collaborating with computational scholars and also with media studies scholars. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the way in which we look at children as consumers, particularly in this very interesting landscape surrounded by influencers. So I run a project called Human Ads, focusing on advertising and content creation on social media. And I work with very talented PhD students, postdoctoral researchers, and we do a lot of research at the intersection of law, computer science, and also media studies. So we try to understand what business models are driving the space of content monetization that I'm gonna very much talk to you about today, but also how we can map and measure things that are happening in this space and what that means actually for public policy, so for regulation. So 4 very brief points on my side. I want to introduce you to a concept that we have been developing in our research, and that is the concept of the new social media. Then we're going to talk a little bit and focus on Gen Alpha and talk about the Sephora Kids phenomenon, and also the consumer dimension of such a generation. I really want to emphasize afterwards the concept of parasociality and perhaps also building on what we have been discussing earlier. And I saw also some questions and some remarks in the chat, why exactly would youth be getting different types of emotions on social media? I have some insights into that from theories and media studies. And then I really want to bring it back to the law and ask, how should we regulate this? What is the role and what is the space in which the law could actually operate? But let's start with the beginning. So the new social media is a concept that we have been developing that really emphasizes a shift in social media spaces. Now, before you have a print screen of the first ever YouTube video posted on the platform. It so happened that this actually took place 20 years ago at a time when it wasn't clear how YouTube was going to make enable people to make money on the internet. But fast forward to today, this is just an example of a top that Forbes runs. It used to have like top influencers, but now it shifted to top content creators. And these are the most successful, richest, most well-known content creators on the internet, who we could even refer to as internet celebrities. And just to give you some numbers here, so this is based on the top that Forbes compiled in 2024 for the year before that. We're talking about 50 people who managed to make over $700 million. So the content creation world is huge. It's really growing. And right now it has a lot of eyeballs dedicated to how exactly people can still become part of that. So while perhaps you can remember the slide that I just showed you with the first video on YouTube, where social media was just about social networking, showing your peers that you went to the zoo. That was actually the first video. Interacting with people in your actual social networks, sharing content from your network or engaging with content from these kind of networks. This was the early version of social media, just posting your photos of your dogs, of your children, of your cakes online. However, this is no longer the case. And why is that? Because we see that there is a convergence of different services in the new social media. So apart from the social networks, we also have social media as actual content delivery. These are platforms that are really displacing entertainment platforms. They're displacing the radio, the television, and this is where people are getting entertainment value. And most importantly, and also a very recent trend, if we can see it very much on TikTok, that has launched a lot of features like this in Europe, even with some delay from the US and Canada and the UK, for instance, TikTok Shop. we see the growth of social commerce. So beforehand, social media, maybe 10 years ago, if you would advertise something on social media, you would still have to get outside of the platform and go to the website of the specific, marketplace that you would like to buy things from, that you would see advertised on social media. And you would have to go to Amazon and buy a certain product from Amazon. That is no longer the case because you can simply just buy things on TikTok. So that is social commerce. Because of the fact that we have this ecosystem, so networks, content delivery, and shopping, I think that it's quite crucial to see social media from a different perspective with new eyes. So this is what we call the new social media. In this space, particularly when it comes to monetizing your content, basically making money as an influencer, as a content creator from the content that you post online, there are certain business models that we have mapped quite a lot. So we have influencer marketing. Influencers are the focus of our conversations here today, but that's only one side of this entire content monetization ecosystem. Then we also have, for instance, the opportunities that are provided by YouTube. You make videos and you get sponsored indirectly through the advertising money from YouTube. So YouTube shares their advertising revenue with you. Whereas influencer marketing was something that you get brand deals from outside of the platform. But we also see subscriptions, tokens like on TikTok Live, the selling of merchandise, the selling of products directly to consumers. I have a very fascinating example for you on that later on. And even this idea of creator funds, the fact that a platform, again, such as TikTok, would actually support creators by paying them for the views that they generate. So in our research in the project in human ads, we focused very much on trying to measure transparency and disclosures on social media, because influencer marketing is very much based on advertising goods and services on social media. But then we know, we have had this hunch, and now we can actually prove it with every single research paper that exists in this field, that there's a lot of hidden advertising in this space. So we, for instance, did a study that focused on 4 countries, on Brazil, the Netherlands, Germany, and the United States. We had a data set of 400 influencers. We don't deal with anything behavioral, so this is what we would call a web measurement study. So we had a data set of over 1 million posts ranging throughout a period of 12 years from these 400 influencers, also very big influencers, and also what we would call micro influencers, around 100,000 followers. And we wanted to see, how much advertising do they say they actually engage in? And we had some very interesting results. You can see here that on average, the Brazilian, Dutch, and US influencer, even the very, very, very big and successful influencers, would say that up to 5% of their content is actually advertising. And we have this huge spike here in Germany, where up to 30% of the content could have been considered by influencers as advertising. And we kind of suspect that because we can't really prove this is not a causal study. Like I said, it's just a web measurement study. But we kind of suspect that what happened there is that Germany has been very, very stringent with regulation. There was a lot of litigation before German courts. Even the German Supreme Court in 2021 heard a joint set of cases around soccer influencers, and actually the wives of soccer influencers on Instagram who were disclosing very poorly all of the brand deals that they had. So we suspect that German influencers were a little bit more attuned to transparency because there had been so much scandalous content around non-disclosures and potential sanctions in their jurisdiction. Then we ran also a study on Dutch influencers. In the past years, there has been some media and consumer law reform happening at European Union level. And for instance, in the Netherlands, there is a registry that very large influencers need to register with. It's run by the Media Authority, and we use that public registry to identify influencers. We had, I think, around 150 influencers. And we followed them on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We had a data set of around something like almost 300,000 posts from these 3 platforms. And we had some very interesting findings because, for instance, we found that Dutch influencers, these very large influencers, at the time when we were doing this data collection, it was the registration dealt with influencers who had more than 500,000 followers on one platform. And we noticed that these very large influencers actually post almost half of their content in English. That also creates very big problems for regulation because normally we have enforcement and rules at national level with official languages. So even that is a question of what language do you communicate your disclosures in if you're an influencer that actually can be relevant across the different member states or even globally. And what we've also found here, and we tried to do something more than just see what influencers are reporting, but we also tried to get a gold standard in the form of a data set on affiliate marketing. So we developed that, and we saw that out of the advertising that we know influencers should have disclosed legally. Again, between 5 and 10% of that advertising was actually disclosed. This only confirms a lot of other research that was done in the US and also dealing with, computational methods of looking at scale at the disclosure of advertising. And for instance, there is Arnesh Mathur, who used to be at Princeton University. And in his research, he showed that, again, affiliate marketing, like 10% seems to be this kind of golden rate at which influencer disclosures peak. So in a nutshell, we have the new social media, we have all of these business models, but we also know that there's a lot of shady things happening because simply advertising is not disclosed. So in this landscape, we have children, and we have Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is the new generation born between 2010 and 2024. And here I have just an example of an influencer who is 16, so she's officially kind of just bordering Gen Alpha, but she has been very, very popular in the past weeks. She's an influencer based in the US. Her name is Salish. She makes videos on TikTok and on her own YouTube channel and on her father's YouTube channel, which oddly enough has way more subscribers than her own channel. She's around 16, but as you can see in this sea of children video from TikTok, when she launched her brand, which is a skincare brand that was launched in collaboration with Sephora, pretty much one of the biggest beauty and makeup chain in the world. This is what happened. The Gen Alpha, so the children following her, the 7-year-olds who might not necessarily entirely know how to read, but want to make videos of and with her products and also become influencers themselves, just joined her in hordes when there were different launching events at different malls where she presented the products. But then, for instance, here you can see the brand is called Sincerely Yours. She presented the products, but also, for instance, had meets and greets, so would interact directly with children, would take photos with them, and also would sing for them. I hope my sound was not available because I would like to save you the sound of the karaoke of Billie Eilish, which in my opinion was not necessarily a highlight of that particular event. Another thing that is quite essential to notice is the fact that if we look at the most popular social media accounts, for instance, on YouTube, again, this is where Generation Alpha is living online. We see that out of the most subscribed channels on YouTube, we have Cocomelon, that's for children. We have Vladaniki, that's a child influencer channel. Kids Diana Show, child influencer channel. And Like Nastia, again, a child influencer channel. So it's very important to understand that one of the things that is really driving children on social media is other children who have products and who enjoy services that their followers and their viewers would also like to have. So the peer pressure dimension comes into the commercial space where these products cost money. And on the one hand, these products can be used and advertised by children who can be influencers, but then they will also end up being bought by parents for their children because they become such very big hits online. And again, maybe I'm going to come back to this slide very quickly just to tell you that, for instance, this video here was taken by a mother who's also a family influencer and who brought her 10-year-old child to this meet and greet, to also make video for her own channel. So we see this like full circle where everybody is a consumer, a follower, but also at the end of the day, an aspiring influencer. So why is that is very, very important to consider this entire circle, the fact that children, the role of children in this ecosystem of social media is very, very much affected by what is called as a parasocial relationship in media studies literature. So parasocial relationships are these unilateral relationships that develop between a content creator and their following, that entails that the following, by seeing the content creator every single day, by listening to the stories of the things that happen in their lives, but when the creator performs authenticity in the form of sharing online, then all of these children will consider this person their friend. There's going to be a view that this content is relatable. I also had this experience, I also want that, and aspirational. So Salish is now a very big star. A child understanding and looking at her entire social media career might equally say, I want to be like Salish. I really want to do that as well. And what we know also from consumer behavior research is that there is a similar concept. So we were discussing with Laura the value of talking to parents about what's happening, for instance, in the consumer world. What is an ad, and how do you understand that someone wants something from you when they're showing you an ad? We have a problem, Houston, we have a problem when it comes to Gen Alpha, because Gen Alpha, so all of these young children who follow influencers and who consider influencers to be their friends because of this authentic and relatable character that they have, they develop these parasocial relationships, and the parasociality affects their critical thinking in terms of understanding that when someone shows an ad, they want something from them. So, they're not promoting a good because they really care about the person using it, or because they really care to share this as a resource, but because they're actually going to earn money if they do that. So there has been research from consumer and communication scholars, for instance, in the Netherlands, such as Sophie Boerman, as early as 2019, looking at consumer socialization and the idea that even if children are going to know that something is an ad on the internet, if they have a parasocial relationship with a person advertising that to them, which might also be an adult, right? So not just children advertising things to children, but they're going to still trust the YouTuber, the creator, because they really admire that person. So now, just kind of to go towards the concluding remarks, what does that mean for the law? Like, should we really have an intervention here when it comes to the law? So I want to build a little bit also on some of the conclusions that Laura shared, this idea that social media is all good or all bad. That's perhaps an extreme way of putting it, but it does reflect some policy discourses that we see in the space. So for instance, one of the policy discourses is very much supported by a lot of media scholars and a lot of social scientists who are trying to understand how technology can be used in a classroom, in the lives of children, and the hobbies of children, in such a way that it can help them develop creativity. So can technology be this support of creativity? And this is the mantra of, tech can be good. We can use it well. We can set very good purposes for it. We can supervise it, and then we can actually use it well. A kind of an example of that in 2020, when the French government set up, or the French parliament, I should say, adopted the child influencer law. That's a change in the labor code of France, giving children some powers to actually ask for their own data to be deleted, their own right to be forgotten if they're child influencers. This shows that, this idea of tech is good. So maybe being a child influencer is not something that we should ban, but at the same time, we should give children agency. We should give children powers to actually make their own decisions in this space. And then we have the mantra of, tech is really bad. And if we consider all of the recommender systems that children have absolutely no influence on, or might even not have a lot of comprehension of, the fact that there's this peer pressure, so all of Laura's research, then we get to this point of considering that actually children have maybe not that much agency when it comes to their cognitive development, and this is something that we see in any kind of civil code in Europe and beyond. This idea that if you're 13, you shouldn't be buying a house because you don't really understand what you're getting yourself into. That's a very, I should say, top-down, like a very paternalistic, to use maybe a little bit of a dated word, a very paternalistic approach from the law, because it says you can't make these decisions by yourself. So we're going to just set some limitations. And we can see an example of that, the entire range of initiatives that are supposed to integrate social media age bans. Australia has been leading the way, but there are a lot of other countries doing that. This is basically saying, okay, if you're under 16, we don't trust you, that you can actually handle yourself online. So we're going to ban you from social media. So we have ourselves a predicament. I don't have answers for you right now because our research hasn't focused specifically on children, but this is a new research strand that we're developing with many consumers. But it is very important to consider that, okay, perhaps parents are not the only answer, but also the law is not the only answer. And we should understand how we can bring together all of these initiatives, because it definitely will take a village to raise a child in the digital space. I look forward to your questions, and happy to engage and to share more resources with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catalina. It's absolutely fascinating, terrifying, but fascinating. I agree with you about the Billie Eilish. Looks awful. We had a couple of questions there which came in. First of all, when you talk about, I don't have the answers, a question also whether AI, do you see any hope around AI being used in a positive way? Question from Dorina.
So I guess that can definitely be the case, but it depends very much how and where. So I can imagine that you can have, I think that there was an initiative at the Berkman Center at Harvard University, and there was an entire unit working on the development of creativity with children. So by really making different tools and integrating perhaps AI in these tools, you can have very positive effects. For instance, I can even imagine that making a workshop with children to make filters online, but like really very happy or, kind of pro-social filters that they can actually add to social media, because there's a very big economy around that. That could be a positive aspect, but it's the same AI that can also lead to negative effects. So that's a little bit the question.
Yeah. Also, Irina asks, because of course we are seeing non-formal educational initiatives now targeting influencers. What do you think that should focus on in terms of actually helping influencers to do a better job, a more socially responsible job? Any thoughts on that?
It's very funny because actually the law and regulators have not really embraced influencers. So it's influencers for regulators. We see this in France as an example. They have been this, this kind of actor in society that regulators will look to and say, you're to blame for this and for this negative aspect. So in France, perhaps this is going to be shocking. It definitely shocked me, but if you are going to, for instance, advertise hyaluronic acid injections, you can go to jail. So there was now a recent case in France where one influencer, a female influencer, who got these lips injections from a non-registered nurse or non-registered medical professional, got a 1-year suspended jail time. And you can even get like 20,000 euros in a fine. So they're really stringent, and I think that there can be much more nuance there, because you can use influencers in a very positive way. It's just a matter of where do you draw the line as to what they should and should not engage in.
Yeah, and it's a question I should have asked at the very beginning, which was in terms of just measuring, what do you mean by an influencer? I mean, is there any value in talking about, a certain number of followers? Does this matter? Because we don't seem to have a definition of what an influencer actually is. So I just wondered, have you any thoughts on that in terms of who do you consider an influencer?
Yeah, so that's great. So there have been 2 laws in Europe, so one in France and one in Spain, that have been defining influencers. In France, there aren't any numbers. It's just about people who really use their influence to actually promote products or engage in different monetization models. Whereas in Spain, there are some very clear numbers. And for instance, there's even a number of earning at least 300,000 euros per year. So not just the size of your following, but how much money are you actually making? And in a way that's good, but the revenue should be really dependent on the country, because also the influencer market is different in different countries. But the follower count is really not a good measurement, because having a million followers on TikTok right now can happen very fast. Having a million followers on YouTube is really a long-term territory. So I think that's something that we should not really focus on.
Okay. Look, in the interest of time, I'm going to hold it there. Thank you very much, Catalina. You're available. You're sharing all your links and resources. It's really, really interesting. But I really would like to move on to our last speaker of the day today, and that is Alyssa McIntyre. And Alyssa is the program officer in the digital program at the Aspen Institute in Germany. And she's going to talk much more, I think, more practically in terms of working with influencers. But over to you, Alyssa. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Sally. So I will share my screen with my presentation, and hopefully you can all see.
See it fine.
Great. Perfect. And actually, the last question that you were just asking, Catalina, is a perfect segue into what I'll be talking about, because we at the Aspen Institute, we're here based in Berlin, and we are actually trying to utilize influencers and empower influencers to be able to see the extent of the influence that they actually have on people and audiences, so that they can shift and have a bit of a different understanding as to how they should actually go about communication and interaction with their audiences, so they can see that their work does actually have impacts and it does have consequences. Because it's interesting. Let me just take it one step back before I get into it. So basically, we have a project here, Influencers Against Disinfo, at the Aspen Institute here in Germany, which we're lucky enough to be funded by the German Federal Foreign Office to do this project. It's a 2-year project. We're getting to the end of it now. But prior to that, we've actually been lucky enough to have a few projects where we've been interacting with influencers and content creators to talk about disinformation and information disorders, which is what we kind of use. We use that term for like disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation, different ways that information can be manipulated to send different messages essentially to audiences. And in the project, we bring together 15 social media influencers and content creators from Central and Eastern Europe. That's the geographic region we're looking at here, to bring them together, talk about their roles in the modern world, in the online space, but also the ripple effects that it has to the real world, to increase their awareness of what exactly disinformation is and how it differs to other information disorders, but then also how they can upskill themselves so they can navigate these difficult issues of what is their responsibility in this modern world when they are creating content, and what's their responsibility to their audiences. Because we frame a lot of the conversations that we have within the project around democracy, and trying to strengthen democratic resilience online, because in the region of Central and Eastern Europe, there is a lot of anti-democratic content that is being created by content creators, but also by external manipulative actors, by AI. So it is a region that has a lot of anti-democratic content being produced, and disinformation is a major method in which they're using to share that and spread that. And we're trying to empower these influencers to push back against this, because we simply can't click a button and stop all disinformation that's being created, because it is being created by lots of different actors, both domestic within these countries, but also external actors, such as there's a lot that's coming out of Russia, particularly in this region. So we're trying to upskill influencers to be able to navigate through these masses of content, so that when they are creating their own content, sharing their own content, they know that it is accurate and fact-checked content, and that they're giving it the right type of stuff to their audiences, essentially. So that's what we're trying to do. And we really see that there is a need to talk to influencers and content creators about this, because the fact is that they are now modern opinion leaders. As the previous speakers have mentioned, there is a lot of impact that these individuals are now having on, particularly on young people, but it's all demographics of society, because many people of all different ages and backgrounds are now utilizing social media. And we're seeing this because there is a bit of a norms change occurring around traditional media. People previously would go to a few different sources to access their news and information, and there was a community and a societal basis for fact and information that was widely accepted. But now that people are sort of pivoting away from traditional media, more to social media, and to these individuals in particular, influencers and content creators, it's now becoming very fragmented. Some people are accessing certain information which may or may not actually be true, and other people are going to other sources. So it's becoming extremely fragmented, and now there isn't necessarily like a societal basis and a community basis of widely accepted fact, which is how we're now seeing there's a lot of polarization and fragmentation within society. And that is having an impact on our democracies, unfortunately. Yes, as I've just got a few statistics up there that can kind of flesh things out that people can read in their own time. But as people have been pivoting towards these online figures, these influencers and content creators, it's also showing that there is a lot of vulnerabilities within this stakeholder group. A lot of them started doing what they were doing because they had a passion, they had an interest of wanting to share information and inform groups about what they're doing, their particular interests, whether it be fashion, whether it be what they're reading about, whether it be linguistics about certain things, feminism issues, these types of things. So it starts from a hobby or an interest. And then because they're able to foster a good community and a following, it grows from there. And a lot of them still are working like they're a one-man show, it's a one-man machine. They're creating all their own content, they're reviewing and editing all of their own content, and they're managing or trying to manage their communities themselves. And this is a lot of work, and they don't necessarily have the resources to actually be doing this. So when it comes to the responsibility, they really struggle to figure out where their responsibility lies, because they started as this small project and now they have hundreds of thousands of followers, and their thinking about their positioning hasn't necessarily caught up to like their realities. And I think this really shows in how a lot of them now, or how they think of themselves, because a lot of what I think outsiders would term these types of people are influencers, right? That's the term we've been using the whole day. But a lot of these people actually prefer the word digital creator, content creator, because they themselves don't see that they actually don't want to believe, or don't actually believe that they have this type of influence upon the people that are following them. They don't, they're not aware of this parasocial relationship that Catalina was talking about. So they don't think that they do actually have influence, but the realities are that they do. So a lot of them aren't comfortable using the term influencer because they don't think that they are. And I think that's part of the problem, where they don't see the potential impacts and the consequences that they're actually having on their audiences, and the ripple effects that are occurring. But because of this sort of shift that we're seeing. As I did mention, there are people that are going into it because of a passion, but there are people that are going into it for financial gains, as we've already touched upon. And there are influence for hire networks that we've seen that have had impacts on democracies and on elections. We saw the Romanian presidential election at the end of last year that was annulled because of the external influence that it actually had. And the investigations that have occurred have showed that there was a lot of manipulation that was occurring, particularly on TikTok, that had an impact on the outcome. But there was also some influences that were manipulated and taken advantage of from outside actors. For example, within the Romanian example, some influencers, they were collaborating with these actors, thinking that it was a well-meaning collaboration, that they were collaborating on a video to promote within their circles. They didn't think it wasn't directly tied to any candidates for the election. So they thought that it was okay because it was talking about leadership and the need to vote and that type of thing. And when these influencers shared this content on their channels with their audiences, within a few minutes, there was masses and masses and masses of comments, which clearly stated Georgescu which is the candidate that was shown to be tied to all of these manipulative tactics, and which is now barred from running, was stating him as, oh, he's this amazing leader. He presents, he's value-centric. He's the best leader for Romania, blah, blah, blah. And there was thousands and thousands and thousands of comments, which then piggybacks on the trust that all of these followers have in these influencers. And then they see, oh, if this influencer is allowing, like, is okay with this messaging of Georgescu being a good potential leader for Romania, maybe I should think about him as a potential vote type of thing. So there's these external actors which are manipulating influencers also for other gains and to have impacts on other things. So there are certain vulnerabilities that we do need to address within this stakeholdership, which is why through the project we try to really bring them into conversations to upskill them so that they can start to make better decisions when it comes to collaborations and their own content that they create and share. So I won't go into too much depth about this slide in terms of content creator communication, because we have gone into that in regards to the parasocial relationship and authenticity. But just one thing that I wanted to touch upon is that sometimes it can be beneficial to look at the number of following that each influencer may have, because we've seen that those that have under 100,000 followers, which are termed micro-influencers, they actually have a very, very high level of engagement with their followers. And in that way, it then translates into quite a strong relationship, because not all influencers have the same level of relationship with their followers. Some are weaker, some are stronger. And those that have under 100,000, they're able to engage with their audiences more. They're able to respond to their comments, to reply to their comments, to reply to messages, which can really strengthen the relationship that followers have with the influencer. And we've seen that these micro-influencers are in that sweet spot. And because their relationships are very strong with their followers, it then means that they are a big target for these external actors, which may be wanting to manipulate them and take advantage of those relationships. So there can be some use of looking at the amounts of followings that influencers have. So with the project, when we bring the influencers together from the region, our project is to have some in-person meetings, some online meetings, but really expose them to experts in the field that are doing research, fact checkers, traditional media, These types of stakeholders that are doing good work in terms of trying to combat disinformation so that the influencers can better understand potentially some tactics and skills and tips and tricks as to how they can try to create higher quality. And when I mean high quality, I mean like more factually based content for their audiences. And also if they do have questions about, oh, is this fact, is this potentially disinformation, they know where they can go to try to clarify these types of questions. And then we tend to frame each project year around a big critical thinking exercise to get them to get their thinking to start to change and to start asking questions about how they may perceive information online, and that then impacts upon how they create content themselves. So previously in the year 2023, we created a policy recommendation where the influencers came together to really think about what is potentially not working very well and where things can be improved, not only from the position of an influencer and content creator, but they also gave recommendations for social media platforms, how they can be doing things better, because this is the environment in which disinformation, these information disorders, where influencers are able to gain this trust and loyalty from people, it's within the environment of platforms. So they are a big stakeholder, which do need to be a part of the conversation. But also when it comes to governments and regulations, so the top-down approach that Catalina was talking about. But last year, actually, during 2024, but we published the publication in early 2025, was an ethical code of conduct, because we wanted to bring ethics and values into the conversation with these influencers and content creators, and to start thinking about having a basis in what they should be working on and how they should be responding to their audiences, and using values and ethics as pillars which they can then return to when they're reflecting upon their content and when they're reflecting upon what they're seeing online too. And I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail about sort of how we went about this ethical code of conduct process. But I'm just going to check the time just to make sure that it's okay.
We're a little
Okay.
short on time, Alyssa, so I'll
Okay,
ask
no
you
worries.
to be a little bit brief. Thank you.
No worries, we'll do. So basically, initially we wanted to sort of kind of see where, let me just go to the next slide because there we go. We wanted to see where all the influencers and content creators, where they're thinking about their responsibility, community engagement, what these perceptions were currently sitting at. And it was very clear that they all had very different opinions. And a lot of these things were based upon the platforms that they were using, the types of content that they were creating, whether it be news, whether it be educational, lifestyle, these types of things, and also the size of their audiences, because practicalities and their resourcing really did factor into the discussion, which was interesting to see, because I think, as I did mention, well, the influencers that we had part of our group, all of them started from like a passion project and because they had interest. And they do have the desire to have more community engagement, but a lot of them saw that it's just not realistic to be replying to every comment within their post, to be replying to every message. So I think that that definitely played into their perceptions about responsibility and values and ethics. So we were a little bit worried that maybe we weren't going to be able to create an ethical code of conduct just because there was a lot of diversity in opinion. However, we stayed true to the purpose, because we really just wanted to create a resource that helped to identify what these base ethics and values should be to help guide behavior and content creation, because it can be used as an educational tool for new influencers coming into the market, for existing influencers to reflect upon their own content creation practices, but also this can be used for users to keep influencers and content creators accountable for what they're actually doing. And with that, we then sort of wanted to firstly highlight key thematic areas that they thought should really be involved and outlined in this ethical code of conduct. And you can see here were the 5 key thematic areas which they highlighted. And then we went through the process of actually operationalizing this. What does this actually mean by providing definitions for the stakeholder group of influencers and content creators? And then we had specific commitment points as to how they could embed these types of values within their own practices. And in this PowerPoint, I've got a link to the publication, so you can look at it at a later date and you can reach out if you have any questions. But that wasn't the only outcome of the project. There was also some great networking between the influencers, because a lot of them are working just by themselves and are facing a lot of similar problems, and especially in the region with some democratic backsliding that we're seeing, and freedom of speech questions, and also traditional media being restricted. There's some discussions from influencers as to how they can potentially step into these gaps, but do this in a responsible way. And also because there's unfortunately some women influencers do face a lot of abuse and discrimination online, and they don't necessarily have outlets to be able to talk to others about this. And we did see there was a lot of increased responsibility from the influencers and content creators, which was great. And they started actually creating content about disinformation. So there was a ripple effect onto their audiences, and so that they could pass on some of their own learnings onto their audiences to start thinking about critically assessing online information. And there's also links on this page to all of the influencers that have been part of the projects so far. But I might leave it there and hand it back to you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. That's really, really interesting. And we share, of course, this information with everybody as well. I do have to say, just to point out, Alyssa, that when you spoke about the Romanian election, that you'll see in the chat, there's been quite a lot of discussion about that and understanding actually what was happening at the time of the election. And I'd like to thank Irina from Broad, because from the EDMO hub in Romania and Bulgaria, because they have produced a report which she has, I think she's put the link in there already, indeed. So Irina, thanks for that. So I think let's have a look at that, everybody, and understand that, of course, this is a very complex issue, and it's worthwhile to kind of check out maybe some of the other resources and the other reporting that has been taking place on the Romanian election. Just though, in terms of kind of specific questions, I think what we're really interested in, of course, is how you've managed to, and I see this coming in from Irina indeed, but how do you get influencers involved? Because I think this is a big question for everybody that you can run great. And in fact, Catalina, if you'd like to come and join us as well for this last part, unfortunately, Laura has had to leave us. But how do you involve, how do you attract them to take part in the work that you're doing, to take on board your code of conduct? What works?
So this is the difficult part, I will say, is getting the right type of influencer on board to be willing to have these types of conversations and to partake in this. I would say those that have larger followings above 100,000 often expect payment to be a part of these types of projects, because they function in a very monetized system, and we don't have the capacity to do that. And also we don't provide any payment to the influencers to be a part of the project. There's no, we don't expect them either to create content about Aspen, about the Federal Foreign Office, or about disinformation. All the content that they create themselves is about disinformation, is because they find it interesting and they think their communities find that interesting. And when we recruit our influencers, we make that very clear, that this is purely more for them to increase their own knowledge and awareness, and to increase their own skills as influencers, so they can be more responsible online opinion leaders, essentially.
Does it work?
I think it does, but one element that is difficult is that, because even though we're Central and Eastern Europe, it's still extremely diverse. And there's lots of different, within each country, there's different political situations, different social situations, cultural situations. And that can be difficult to navigate sometimes, because while we do have some Ukrainian influencers and content creators as part of the group, and they are facing an extremely difficult reality, and that factors into their online experiences also. So they are seeing a lot of online disinformation about the war that's occurring.
Maybe we
but
could
we
just
do-
switch to Catalina, because I'd be
Sure.
curious, Catalina, if you've got any suggestions. I mean, how to attract influencers, stroke content providers, content creators to this to this topic, or making them more responsible, and how do you do it?
So I think fascinating talk, Alyssa. I'm really interested in your work as well. And I think that from my perspective, because also in our project we deal with political speech as well, we notice a massive paradigm shift where perhaps maybe 5 to 10 years ago, influencers were, just everything was just about influencer marketing, about advertising beauty products and whatnot. And now, if we look at the White House that just hosted an influencer brief with news influencers, right? So you can be an influencer journalist or a journalist influencer. You can just use authenticity to reach a broader public if you are an actual journalist, but you can also become a journalist by reporting on news if you're an influencer, and that can be content for your channel. And I think that, so the White House has been doing this under Trump, but also under Biden. I think at some point even Obama had YouTubers at the White House. Downing Street is organizing influencer receptions. So we see, and we even had some research in our project on how the Dutch government used influencers. And I think that indeed influencer acquisition, let me put it like that, is very, very, very burdensome, because it also depends on how, like the conversation that we had earlier, who do you define as an influencer? So do you go for celebrities, for people who are maybe more traditionally popular, or do you go for internet celebrities? And I think that there is also a rather natural divide, because there will be content creators who really want to make it into their brand and actually benefit in a monetization perspective here, to become political commentators, and then to try to not influence, but just, promote themselves as the new talk shows, and they are available on the internet. And there has been research also done, not by us, on how, for instance, podcasts were very, very efficient in disseminating different messages, particularly on the right-wing side in the US elections. So this is where the people are at, and that's why governments are really trying to get there, and that's why political speech in this space is very, very important.
Yeah, I just wanted to know either if you had any thoughts about, because we're kind of dodging this thing between influencer, content creator. I mean, do you think it's a good thing that we start using the general term? Somebody in the chat was kind of referring to the fact that it's the more popular, the more acceptable term nowadays. Also, does it take from the fact that, influence is somewhat negative in many ways? I mean, have you any thoughts on that? Should we be talking about content creators or influencers?
So that's a
Katrina,
very good. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, please do. Yeah.
So that's a very good point, and maybe Alyssa can also share her thoughts on this. But I think that we have a shift from the perspective of business models. So content creators are just a broader range of people who are monetizing their activity on the internet, whereas influencers are just dealing in advertising. And of course, from a political perspective, we can even have, there are tops, I think, Euractiv or Politico, I don't remember, also makes tops of EU influencers, like who are the actual influencers in Brussels. So influence has this very volatile nuance, I think, in the political sphere, and content creator is just also the preferred language of platforms. So we have looked into that, and platforms just do not use the term influencer, but they do use the term content creator, because it's also it really emphasizes the creativity dimension. So yeah.
Positive. Alyssa, what do you think?
Yes, I think it's really important to actually talk about the terminology and the definition, because I think without having that, it can allow some of these influencers, content creators, to kind of slip by and justify not having responsibility because they don't see themselves as being part of this group or part of this group. So I think it is important to have clearer terms and definitions. And I think we really should be trying to move in a position to try to professionalize this sector a bit more, because by doing that, we can create a bit more like guardrails and regulations about this. So I think by trying to take these steps, we can have some greater guardrails in place for consumers, but then also influencers themselves, so they can be better supported to navigate these difficult situations better, so they're not as alone trying to figure out how to navigate these situations.
Yeah. I mean, how do you both feel about banning? I mean, we're getting lots of talk about banning social media now for young people and stuff like that. Good thing or bad thing? It's a polarizing question for you, Catalina. You're allowed to say something in the middle. Over to you.
So I also see what Dorina is mentioning in the chat about freedom of
Yeah.
expression, and I think that that's a very interesting point because, for instance, if we look at commercial speech, freedom of expression is in very, very legitimate ways, very easily curtailed. So you can sell a product and you can advertise a product that doesn't have 100% apple juice if you say it has 100% apple juice in it. So these kind of factual statements are very straightforward in the commercial space, and influencers and content creators who advertise come from this commercial reality. Of course, in the political realm, and we have had cases like this in the Netherlands where the government hired an influencer to be part of a COVID campaign, to do a campaign and say, oh, please go and do social distancing. But then the influencer, after 3 months, changed her mind and then actually popularized exactly the opposite message. And this is a very interesting kind of reflection on, should there be such kind of influencer marketing in the political space? Because you're actually buying an opinion. And opinions are very, very human, and they can be changing all the time. So it's very volatile to do that. And that's why, for instance, what we notice in the aftermath of the Romanian elections is that there's a new category of content creator coming out, people who earn a lot of money on lives, on TikTok lives, where perhaps they're not necessarily engaging in advertising, but they benefit from the polarization in society for people to actually send the money for the lives. So content creation, therefore, just has such a broader range of problematic things.
Good better term. Alyssa, what do you think? Banning a good idea?
I don't think it's realistic to ban it, honestly. We mentioned that Australia is trying to sort of ban under 16s, but the reality of that is, even now Australia is trying to figure out how to do it. But I think it's just going to be extremely difficult, and it's going to end up being with the major platforms end up being exempt because they have personal messaging, because of there's educational elements. There's going to be get-arounds, and I don't think it's realistic, honestly.
Just not practical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, thank you. I don't want to end on a negative note, but we did go a little bit longer than we kind of expected to do today, but we really wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to hear all three great presentations. So thank you so much to Laura, who's not with us, of course, but we were delighted to have her, but to you, Catalina, and to Alyssa, thank you so very much. We just have a couple of quick announcements to do before the end. You can, as we said at the beginning, of course, we'll make available the recording of the session today, and also make sure that the PowerPoints are available to you with all of the links and all of the information. We really want to promote to you and to tell you all about our Media Literacy for Media, our MLA for Media Lit conference, which is taking place online the 17th of October. It's a full day conference from 10 until 4, and it's all about building societal resilience through digital and media literacy. So very much on the topic of today, insofar as that, you know, media literacy, digital media literacy is the only way that most people would now agree that we're going to start to see the kinds of changes that we need to see happening. So join us, please. It's free. You just have to register online. Also like to tell you that for the rest of autumn and heading into winter, these are the events that are coming up from the Media Literacy or Media Learning Association. The next one I've already mentioned the conference, but on Wednesday, the 14th of November, same time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll have a session specifically on understanding and responding to health disinformation. And then on Wednesday, the 17th of December, heading up towards Christmas, our webinar is going to be on lines of speech, and it's going to be hate, harm, and the laws across borders. So very much to do with what is and what isn't legal insightful and learning about these topics, and also be able to share them with others. All sessions are on our YouTube channel. You can always pick them up there from us. And again, thank you so much to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Thanks as always to Chloe, my wonderful colleague, who manages to keep the show on the road, even when we had a little bit of a difficult start. And thanks to all the speakers today and to you for joining us. And I hope the rest of the week goes well and that autumn and winter is nice wherever you are. Thanks for your time. Bye bye now.